This is something I made. It took a while, but it came out pretty well, I think. While it's something mostly decorative, in sort of an American folk art style, I also used it as a chance to do a little thinking about time. Hopefully, you'll find something interesting if I explain a little bit about the design. Most obvious here is the cycle of the four seasons, represented by the familiar motif of the tree. Behind that, we see the sky get lighter and darker with the lengthening and shortening of the daylight hours throughout the year. We see the green grass of spring and summer, browning through autumn, and then the snow cover of wintertime. These are aspects of our world that we have seen changing around us in a regular cycle since the beginning. When we see these things, we know where we are within the year. For this video, I thought I would give it some actual movement, making it turn so that from the viewpoint of the observer, the objects in the scene move in from the right, or east, and then away to the left, or to the west. Down at the bottom of the beaded area, there are markings for the smaller cycles we observe within the year. I made marks for the equinoxes and solstices, and for the months and the weeks. Once we start looking very close, we can even get down to the cycle of a day, represented by a single bead. The curve of the visible hemisphere of the tiny round beads recall the path of the sun as it moves through the sky each day. Building the pattern back up from these beads, we can count 365 of them to make a complete circuit around this design. But every fourth time around, it takes 366. These years do not just stack up as discrete cycles. Each one starts where the last one leaves off, and as they go around, there is something that binds them together into one. Literally, that something is one silk thread that runs through all these beads and wraps them into a great spiral. So how many times to go around this design? That was an interesting question I asked myself. I decided on 70, a bead for every day of a 70-year lifetime, a kind of saeculum. There are actually an additional 9 months worth of beads at the beginning and an extra 40 days at the end. The wood I used was cut down on the lot next to my church. The priest who founded this parish had the name of Boniface, from the saint who took an axe to the tree of the pagans and built the church that enlightened the Germans. The knowledge of this carried with it a layer of narrative, and a few elements from the Orthodox liturgical year peek through this simple landscape design. Starting here in the September sky, we can recall the nativity of the Theotokos, the Mother of God, with 3 stars from her veil. Then, in the darkest days of the year, we see the great star of the Nativity of Christ shining brightly. The waters of the Theophany, where Christ was baptized by John the Forerunner, run through January. After winter, moving into springtime, we see a hill and a cave, elements present in the settings of many icons. Now perhaps it is a tomb. Here we find a bright fire burning, the holy fire of the resurrection, and the little sparks are rising up through it through the years on the dates of Pascha. 40 days later, we remember Christ's ascension above the rainbow. Then we have the brightness of the Holy Spirit coming down in Pentecost and breathing life into the church. When vestments turn green, as flowers and verdant foliage are used for decoration, now we are in August, and in the background we see a hill reminding us of Mount Tabor, where Christ was transfigured to his disciples. And as summer ends and the sky gets darker, we pass the Dormition of the Theotokos. But then we soon look up and find ourselves back at her nativity and the beginning of the cycle of the year. For many centuries, this cycle has turned, informing the lives of generations of the faithful, as it has impressed itself into my experience of the calendar. Since the ancient ages, men have measured time by the movement of the great bodies above them, the sun, the moon, and the seasons of the earth. The sun rose in the east, moved across the sky, and went down in the west every day. The moon went through its phases in the course of every month. The seasons rotated through their cycles of warm and cold every year. These are the things that set a common rhythm to men's lives. In modern ages, men have turned their attention downward for ways of mastering time by dividing it ever more precisely. From the ground they dug the metal ore to make the springs to power the mechanical clockwork. Then they applied energy to crystals and counted their tiny vibrations. Now they focus down closer and closer on the fundamental material of the earth with their atomic clocks, and from there send out a signal across the world, attempting to synchronize us all, to completely account for every moment. But we still run late, and forever chase perfection, to bring about alignment of the earth with our will. Something that creeps into the most scientific methods of reckoning time is the constant need for making adjustment at every scale of measurement. This is to make the rational systems created in the minds of men correspond to the external world, the realm of their bodies. Examples of this can be found in the imperceptible leap seconds added to atomic clocks to compensate for the gradual slowing of the rotation of the earth. Up to the great Western calendar of Julius Caesar and the correction of it by Pope Gregory, and now perhaps you can even sense the forced acceleration of time in this attempt at a great reset. To be within time is not about reaching perfection. It is about movement. It is about the earth not aligning with the heavens. On this changing earth, beneath this moving heaven, is when we live. By far the most satisfying part of making this project was seeing the image emerge as the beads on the string were wrapped around the log. Getting the diameter just right is what brought things into focus. It was like getting the curvature of a lens corrected precisely to produce a sharp image. As it works out with the size of these tiny beads, 6 inches is just about the exact diameter needed to make the circumference of a year. Overall, this log that I chose is 12 inches tall, and the design wraps around 5 of those inches. There are over 100 different colors of beads, strung in the proper order to make this design. I like the idea of using silk thread for this. Thought of the silkworm living in a tree, spinning the silk that will contain him during his transformation. This wood was freshly cut when I got it, and from the looks of it, this tree had many stories in it. Drying a log like this without it developing checks and cracks is very difficult. Careful as I was, splits have appeared. I leave the cracks in there as part of the story. Perhaps my thread wrapped around it will help hold it together in some way. This is something I made.